All right, good. That one right there as well.
Okay.
Like the last thing. We managed to. Yes. You'll check it over the 3 times after it all.
Favor, you wouldn't mind just doing a little test for us, like your mic isn't on. Mike,
Yeah, yeah.
we've got to stop meeting like this, Andy. It'll turn green.
Stop needing to change.
You go.
There it is.
P and Z, we've got to stop meeting like this. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
right.
You may be.
Oh, it's green down here. Yeah. Let's,
So poor. It is. Thank you. Before it showed up.
Oh, there.
I
got it.
I think there's still information. Well, this doesn't seem to be. He's showing it. Last time it showed up down here that I could recognize.
So George, does your speak thing work? Yeah, mine is like red. It was only mine.
Mine does.
So you don't even.
Need to get Ryan down here.
Yes.
Yeah, I do somewhere to somebody, right? It's just not here yet.
That's another one of your things.
Yeah, look through your name right side. Somebody had it upside down. Real low, looking out for you.
Don't want to get in trouble.
WAM.
That's what you.
Back here, maybe Scott, there's something there. Yeah, good. Or the other. Pick up below here. When I get down.
Yes. We're just gonna put everyone's mic on for the whole way. So no whispering.
Yeah.
Except for your, yes. Yeah, that's just true. I'm not sure.
We'll find out real soon.
Are we using hands for comments or?
Yelling.
Doing?
That might be a good idea.
So we're all set? Okay, the time is 6:19 by my watch. This is City of Glenwood Springs Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, regular meeting for June 27th, 2023. We're meeting a hybrid meeting with people here in the council chambers, as well as on Zoom, which is passcode 177366. And telephone number is 1-719-359-4580. And please call the roll.
Commissioner Connerton,
Here.
Commissioner Davey,
Here.
Commissioner Shaver,
Here.
Commissioner Cowan,
Here.
Commissioner White,
Here.
Commissioner Sims,
Here.
Commissioner Waller,
Here.
all present.
And we need to seat alternate Alan. Take a motion to do so.
I'll make a motion to seat him.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, just a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. We have conflicts of interest on the agenda this time, which I'm not familiar with in the past. So does anybody here have any conflicts of interest on items related to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we will go on to receipt of minutes. We have two meetings, and I think we have quorums on both of those. If I'm not mistaken. Meetings from May 23rd of this year. And I will take a motion for receipt of those minutes.
Make a motion to accept the minutes from May 23rd.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, I will take another voice vote to receive those minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Okay,
I'm abstaining. I wasn't there.
I
All right.
abstain as well. I was not.
I abstain as well. I was not there.
okay. Let's see, do we have, let's see, I was there. Matthew was there, right?
Yes.
Gregory was there. And April, so. We have 4 people. Okay, moving on to April 25th. Minutes.
I'll make a
And-
motion to accept those minutes.
Okay, we have a
I will
motion
second the motion.
and a second, and any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call for a voice vote on that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those minutes have been received. Now I will now open up the meeting to comments from citizens appearing for items that are not on the agenda. We have anyone here that would like to address the P and Z? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment period. Did we have anybody online? I guess. Nobody online for that. All right, well, I'll close the public comment period then. And we will move on to new items, number 7A, strategic housing plan, and we have Watkins here to present that to us.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for your patience with our technical difficulties. Hopefully we've got it all sorted out now. We just had a work session where we discussed the strategic housing plan update. What we're going to do now is kind of run through it again for the benefit of the public. You're going to hear a really brief introduction and background from myself, and then I'm going to turn it over to our consultant team again. So here we go. The strategic housing plan update is an update of the 2010 housing plan. That plan, that was a good plan. It has some things that are still relevant in it. It talked a lot about things like the job housing balance. It had some good data in there about our housing need at the time. That being said, it was from 2010. That was a little while ago. We think it's time for an update. And to do that, we received some grant funding from the state, specifically from the Department of Local Affairs, DOLA, to fund this plan. Part of the funding requirements for paying for this plan update was that we are required to make a good faith effort to adopt some policies or some code changes from a specific list of approved strategies, which I'm going to show you guys, which were in the packet. So our consultant team began work on this in December of 2022. We have to finish it up this year, and what we have in your packet is a draft of it. And so what we're doing today is going to be discussing the draft. The packet has some discussion questions that you can all pull from. We're going to hear some in-depth analysis from the consultants about what's in the plan, how they got to what the plan is. Then if you all are comfortable, you can make a recommendation that City Council adopt with changes or not adopt the plan. And so again, City Council is the deciding or the adopting body for this plan. And not part of tonight's agenda, but something that you will see soon is we will be moving to adopt at least one of the qualified strategies from the list. This is the list. I'm not going to go through it right now, but I just wanted to show it to you all. There are 16 items. Many of the things we do already, but there are some opportunities here for some new things for us to do. I have a motion up here that I can refer back to you guys, or I can just tell it to you as well if you need help with that. And that is about it for me. It's also some alternative motions if you need those. So with that, Carson and Andrew.
Sure. Do I need to be mic'd for the record? Okay. We can do that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and please state your name for the record.
Okay, thank you. Andrew Knudsen and Carson Bryant here with Economic and Planning Systems. From 1730 17th Street, Denver, Colorado. That depending on what the record requires. Okay, sorry about that. We're new here, obviously. We are not new to Glenwood in terms of affordable housing issues. We have worked on affordable housing as consultants advising numerous communities throughout the Rocky Mountain West and have a wide range of current clients who we are advising on affordable housing. We are drawing from that experience and ultimately calibrating a set of recommendations for Glenwood, given the conditions in Glenwood today. We have a combination of things in the packet and in the work that we've been doing with Watkins and Hannah. One is a needs assessment, which is the model that calculates the amount of need based at catch up and keep up. Carson will go into that in some detail. And that is the why of and solidifying all of the data to provide a platform for why the city should move forward with the housing program. The how is the different elements within that program, the different actionable items. And so we'll spend some time tonight on the actionable items that are recommended and how to further calibrate that to make sense for the Glenwood community. And we will also review the numbers in terms of the needs assessment, in terms of providing that platform for why we should move forward. If you want to look at the, if you want to advance one slide, this is our, we just want to note that this builds on the 2010 strategic housing plan. And there have been many actions the city has taken since 2010, which are significant. Not every community has moved forward and been able to get 6 different things on the books, not to mention a 2.5% increase to the lodging tax and a permanent funding source. That's a big accomplishment, and it's exciting to think about building on this space as we consider these other options.
Well, so there are really 4 different policy areas in the strategic plan, and we're going to walk through each of them, both the details of them and why they're here, and also the associated recommendations for each of the policy areas. So I'll go ahead and start with the first one. The use of city-owned vacant land to develop housing on. So really the logic behind this is that when you use city-owned land, you can make multifamily projects, especially ones with an affordable component, more financially feasible, right? You reduce the cost of development by taking land out of the equation. And in exchange for that, the city really has a lot of power to define the criteria for this development and what it includes. So standards around affordability, for example, how many affordable units it provides, the product type and the desired density, and how that relates to the surrounding context. Community benefits, so things like parks or green space or ground floor retail space. And then this question of whether or not the land should be sold or leased as part of the development. And big thing that really ties this together is putting this all into a formal and transparent process that's readily understandable by prospective developers. And so our recommendations here are identify the city-owned parcels that are the highest priority for near-term development. And for each of these parcels, that's a priority. Define the key characteristics of that. So define things like what type of development you want on it, what the affordability standards should be, and whether it's best achieved through a sale or a lease. And then also, on top of that, establishing our request for proposal framework that have clear criteria for the proposed development. So beforehand, a developer would know the standards they need to meet in order to develop on that city-owned land. And then, of course, another soft part of this is cultivating relationships with developers and making sure there's an established base of people who would be interested in doing that kind of housing development. And then think about additional incentives with the way that costs have gone and the direction of the market in the Roaring Fork Valley. It might be necessary to provide additional incentives on top of city-owned land in order to make these projects work and to ensure that they can actually deliver affordable units. So that gets into the development of new units, and I want to talk about preservation as a key strategy here. So preserving existing housing units, their affordability. So prices and rents have been going up, and that leads to instability for a lot of residents, and they're looking for placement. And it makes it more difficult for people to stay. And so preservation policies, which we'll talk about those in more specificity here in a second, can help stabilize those residents. And a really important part about preservation is that when you preserve a unit, it's often a really effective use of limited city resources. When with developing units being pretty expensive, preservation can often be a less expensive way to keep people housed and to meet housing targets. And so our recommendations for this, and sorry that the little screen there is in the way, but prioritize mobile home preservation first and foremost. There are a lot of mobile home parks in Glenwood Springs. A lot of those residents, for one reason or another, are at risk of displacement or being priced out of that housing type, especially when they go up for sale and a new buyer comes in. Things like raise the lot rents. And so what the city can do about this is, first of all, expand the information on the inventory of mobile home parks and figure out questions like how likely is this to be bought and the residents place as a result, get some clarity on the current status, and then implement programs to stabilize residents. So things like land use overlays can prevent the prospect of future redevelopment. Supporting resident purchases. So a lot of state tools are available now to enable residents to purchase their park, and that can often be an effective way to preserve that housing over the long term. And also things like infrastructure and legal support can be a big help to stabilizing residents of parks. Motel conversions are another possibility. The city recently changed the code to make that easier, but that's another path for taking existing structures and turning them into affordable housing units. Community land trusts are something to explore here, whether forming them locally or partnering with an existing regional or statewide community land trust. And then considering other preservation approaches over the long run. So things like rental assistance, things like home repair loans and grants for homeowners who have a big maintenance burden, potentially relocation assistance for tenants who are displaced. A lot of different possibilities there, but those are more long-term ideas. And then for all of these, estimating costs for these actions. How much do they cost and where do they make? So the third major policy area here is density bonus. And so why are we talking about a density bonus? It gives the market an additional avenue to deliver housing units while requiring a minimal amount of additional investment in the city. If the development is already going, you're enabling a developer to build more, that could have cost savings and it could create more units at an efficiency. It's also a good and effective way to utilize land without growing outward and sprawling. Glenwood doesn't have a ton of land left to expand. And if you can concentrate on things like infill development, adding units, that can be a big long-term benefit, especially when it's near public transportation and you reduce the traffic impacts of new housing development. And so there are two real main approaches to a density bonus that we talked about in the strategic plan. So there's allowing more units on lots in residential neighborhoods, so upzoning, which we'll talk about in the recommendations, and then increasing allowable density in multifamily projects, major corridors. And most importantly, establishing clear parameters for people who want to utilize the density bonus. So our recommendations here, so first of all, update the zoning code to enable up to 3 units to be built on lots currently zoned for single unit housing. So allowing greater density in those residential neighborhoods. And then when development does occur on major commercial corridors, seek opportunities to increase that potential and provide a density bonus. And in the code, define the affordability parameters that are required to receive this density bonus. Make it clear what those are and contextualize it in regard to the inclusionary housing ordinance, whether it's about the same or greater than what that ordinance requires. And then also think about a density bonus that might apply to projects that are below the 10-unit inclusionary housing ordinance threshold. And then lastly, update the existing density bonus to define the parameters of what it requires to receive that density bonus, whether that's things like how they achieve it, things like setback reductions, parking reductions, and increase in height, and so on.
So two other elements in the plan that we're going to be presenting. One is funding sources. So we do have 2C, it was passed in 2022, estimated to generate 1.3 to 1.5 million annually. That's a terrific local source. Any kind of federal or local program or federal or state program is always looking for local match. So phenomenal way to leverage state and federal dollars, particularly with the availability of 1, 2, 3. We've got some state dollar, a greater commitment from the state than we've ever had before, and potential ways to tap that. In terms of the specific question in the plan, similar to what we heard during the work session we had this afternoon, lots of questions about bang for the buck. How do we deploy these dollars in a way that generates the greatest impact? And so that's really kind of that comparison of different tools with the use of local, state, and federal dollars is a next step, if you will. But what we do want to do is establish at least a 5-year plan that states the revenue sources and then the prioritization for how they will be deployed. One of the other things that have come up as an option is the buy down, which is where we've got precedent from Breckenridge and Vail in terms of their use of funds to acquire and derestrict existing housing inventory. And depending on the tier, Breckenridge has a 2-tier system, resident occupancy and local employment, and then a second tier that includes that plus deed restriction in terms of appreciation on the unit. Vail only has the employment and residency requirement. Both communities require about 15 to 17% for that first tier. Post-COVID, with the market pressure, Vail has started to see that go up to 20%. Then to have that second tier that includes the deed restriction on appreciation, that pops it up to about 30% of market value. So lots of interest in this program, it appears, from our conversation in the work session, but concern that it might require too much funding per unit to have an effect that we're trying to see. Perhaps there's some other programs that could affect a greater number of units. So that's kind of a combination of what the research shows, the concept itself, and some of the conversation that we had earlier today. We have about 8 more slides on the needs assessment itself. This is where we go through step by step, tab by tab through a model, identifying all of the various model inputs that take the economic conditions of the community, the demographic conditions of the community, quantify them in a way that generates a target for the housing goals. And Carson, you want to take us through those steps now?
Yep, I'll take us through those steps. So the components of the needs assessment are based on policy goals, and they are subject to discretion. And the big categories, which are both through individually, are reducing cost burden, filling unfilled or vacant jobs, reducing in-commuting, and meeting housing demand generated by future growth. And then another thing that's important to mention here is that we looked at need between 30% of AMI and 150% of AMI. This is the range that housing programs that are locally funded could realistically serve. So the first category here is cost burden. So a cost burden household is a household spending more than 30% of its income on housing. So essentially households in Glenwood Springs that are currently in unaffordable living situations. So to estimate need here, we took 50% of cost burden households. We thought this was a significant number of the cost burden households, but also acknowledge the fact that not everyone who is in a cost burden household would realistically want to or need to change their housing situation. So that's the target that we have used here. The next category is unfilled jobs. So unfilled jobs are really important in the context of this needs assessment because they're directly tied to the functioning of the local economy. When jobs can't be filled, businesses and the local economy suffers, right? There's a lower level of service and something that's, I'm sure, been experienced by a lot of folks here. And in order to fill those jobs, you need housing, right? Often barrier to not filling those jobs is a lack of housing availability. And so we proposed here that we would fill 100% of vacant jobs. And we translated that to housing unit demand between 30 and 50% of AMI. So another thing we looked at in this needs assessment was in commuting. So about 22% of Glenwood Springs workforce lives somewhere else. 22% of the workforce lives locally, about 78% commutes in somewhere else. And reducing commuting is really important both for the well-being of those workers, but also for the community and for the environment. Things like reducing greenhouse gas emission and traffic associated with that commuting. And in order to house more people locally, we need more housing. This generates additional housing. And so we proposed that we would increase the share of people housed locally from 22% to 30%, which leads to a pretty substantial amount of additional housing. So the last part is future demand, or what we like to call keep up. So how does Glenwood Springs keep up with the housing demand generated by employment growth? We looked at employment projections from the state demographer over the next 20 years and found that in order to house people generated by employment growth between 30% of AMI, it's about 512 total units, about 25 units annually. Next 20 years. So to summarize it all, so in total, there's a housing need of about 1,860 units over the next 20 years. That's about 93 units annually. If we assume these different policy goals, so reducing cost burden by 50%, filling 100% of vacant jobs, and increasing the share of the workforce housed locally from 22% to 30%. And so something I wanted to emphasize that came up in our conversation earlier was that this total need is not literally 1,860 new housing units out of the ground. It can be met through a combination of new housing production and the preservation of existing units, right? So this is something to consider when we're talking about how to prioritize resources, how to allocate funding to meet this need over the next 20 years.
All right. So that's the basis for the housing study that hopefully is more incremental as people have questions about how it was generated. The model is fairly transparent in terms of all of the inputs and how they integrate to generate these numbers. And it's about 10 tabs within an Excel worksheet, not too complex. Based on that, then we've got these various tools in terms of the actionable items. And I think we'd like to hear comments from the P&Z in terms of both topics, the need as well as the recommended actions. Watkins, you developed a memo with specific questions. And you want to take it through that? You want to go through that? You want to? How do you want to handle it?
I think we can turn it over now to P&Z. If you have questions for either staff or for our consultants. And
Okay.
I'll just say, at some point, we will need to do public comment. Just want to remind you of that.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen. Questions, comments? One thing I've come off the top of my head is we're talking about these units. What is the unit count in Glenwood currently?
Total
3,700 housing units.
What number?
About 3,700.
3,700. Okay. So when we're talking about 1,800, we're half again of the population now over the next 20 years, or number of units
yes.
increased by 50%.
So I have a follow-up question. I pushed my button, but it doesn't work. So.
Oh, yeah, please.
So on that is, so when I hear the 1868 or whatever the number is, so we have construction going on right now for 300 units over at the Meadows, and there's projects over where the rivers, blah, blah, blah. There's multiple projects going on. So are those projects part of the 3,700, or are those projects part of the 1,800?
I think they're actually, if they haven't been CO'd, they're not part of the existing certificate of occupancies, they're not part of the existing inventory. And they're not deed restricted, so they wouldn't be part of the affordable inventory
Though some of them are deed restricted,
Okay.
right? There's,
portion,
Small portion.
small portions of them.
so is 1868, that's only deed restricted because it's the 30% to 150. AMI.
And it's a deed restriction. In some cases, the deed restriction will be only just to require work and local occupancy, local employment, local occupancy. Some deed restrictions are not related to AMIs and price caps, but some are. All of that would be considered an affordable unit in terms of movement towards this target.
So as developers are building, let's say they, what is it, 20% inclusionary is what it is now. So the 80%, that wouldn't even be part of the 1868. So the numbers could be, need to be much more than that. I'm looking at Hannah. Do you agree with that?
I'm not going to commit to that statement, but you're right that our inclusionary zoning only hits at the 100% AMI and their needs assessment includes much lower. So.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So the 2C, the numbers you give us, the 1.3 and the 1.5 million, is that specifically for Glenwood then? Allocated for Glenwood, and that's per year. Discretionary money to be used for affordable housing. And my assumption is that municipalities are using it in a tiered way, either for preserving or creating affordable rentals. But there probably is a component or a sector of that money going towards like a buy down, which would be more of a purchase by either a corporation or a individual. Is there any sort of module where people are providing it in the form of like a rate buy down for a down payment assistance where, if you can buy down your rate 1.5 points, then your monthly payment is so much less. I just feel like that might be a way to reach more people instead of doing a massive buy down for one individual unit.
That's a great idea. And as much work as we do throughout the Rocky Mountain West, that's a new one in the playlist.
Wonderful.
So the down payment assistance, it's been part of the conversation in a number of different communities for a while, but particularly given what's going on with the Fed and the pressure on cost of funds, buying down mortgages is a creative idea. And we need to be careful about our nomenclature in terms of the term buy down.
Right.
But making funds available to buy down mortgages could have potentially more leverage and in exchange for deed restriction.
Right. Right, exactly. You would still make it resident occupied. And then because it seems like a lot of the land use overlays, like all those things that are code related can be done with very little funding.
Oh, absolutely.
And
And there's a lot of power in land use regulation.
Right,
A lot
right.
of capability there, effective, long-term.
Right. Let's see here. And then this is maybe more for staff, but in relationship to this, when we have an affordable housing project that's a new construction project, is any of that, I know we waive tap fees for people that are developing affordable housing units. Do we do that for ourselves? And then how are we recuperating improvement fees that are necessary for these units, whether we're paying them or not? I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, you're talking about waiving system improvement fees, waiving
Right.
the impact fees with new development. City council has that ability to do pretty much at their discretion. They can do that. You can make your case to city council and they can do it. The way that we can do it administratively is with the voluntary deed restriction. You've probably heard about that. That's when they voluntarily, and this happens a lot with accessory dwelling units, right? they voluntarily agreed to price cap it and make it resident occupied in exchange for waiving those system improvement fees.
Well, and I understand that. I guess my question is, are we somehow glutting our system? How are we recuperating any sort of, that money that we're giving up? If we put this massive effort towards affordable housing.
I believe what would happen is we'd backfill it from the general fund.
Okay.
The enterprise funds that, each of the utilities have can't be used for other purposes. So that would probably be backfilled.
Okay. But technically, we could use some of this 1.3 or 1.5 million dollars a year towards tap fees for additional units being created for affordable housing.
So just as a clarification, the 1.3 to 1.5 million is 2C ballot measure funding and has very specific parameters around it. So it is incredibly specific to Glenwood Springs and the money that was passed by the voters. So we'd need to run any project by to meet those parameters, but those aren't state monies, not to be
Right.
confused with the other funding sources, as there are many currently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So these system improvement fees are in lieu of tap fees only, not ongoing costs of, like a normal billing cycle. Is that correct?
Yes, so our system improvement fees are something that are charged during the building permit process, and it is a one-time payment into those.
Right. Right.
People use system improvement fees and tap fees to mean the same thing, but they're actually different funds. So system improvement fees are parkland, school, water, sewer, and fire and emergency services. So it's a payment when a development comes in. It's not the ongoing water rate or sewer rate that is a monthly billing.
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a few other questions.
Oh, please, go ahead, Pete.
So one question, when I read through your report, which by the way is very good, very thorough, thank you very much. All of the projects to me, they're all individual, when you talk about here's the number of units, and we talked about this earlier, it's not all tied together. And so a question that I have, and I don't know, maybe it's Watkins who has to do this, or maybe you guys are doing it, I don't know, but who puts together the overall strategy? I'm thinking a spreadsheet, I'm an engineer, so thinking like a spreadsheet that's got, here's the different types of housing, if you're 30% AMI versus your 120% AMI kind of thing, and here's the kind of projects, which is city property, here's an enhancement. I mean, there's all, it's complicated of all of the different types of things. And then the funding, et cetera, that sort of thing. That's at least a stab in the ground that is the first blush of here's how you go at it, or is it just an ad hoc thing that, we have strategies and we make up goals, it's 50%, 8%, and it sounds like a good number, or is it, are we basing it based on actual numbers and pricing and what kind of housing, whether it's a motel, whether it's a, blah, 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 all of that, it's very complicated. So versus I'm reading a document versus I can look at, here's our plan, which we evaluated every year and go, well, that didn't work, we're changing to this.
Well, I think what Commissioner Waller is talking about is the implementation of the strategic housing plan.
Exactly.
And these are great questions.
Kind of the rubber meeting the road.
Rubber meeting the road. Yep. Yeah, I don't think I have all those answers tonight, but what the plan does is give us kind of a roadmap of what to do. The plan may not have all the specific answers for every question that we come across. But it gives us a good place to start. It gives us an idea how much some things cost, what our options are, first of all. You guys have.
Well, the one thing I would add is just keep in mind that one of the biggest parts of this is how do we leverage the local dollars against state and federal match? I mean, hopefully there's a tax. I mean, we don't want to get too far into what these projects look like down the road, but there are ways to tap into that. those dollars to make the 1.3 to 1.5 go further. And so that's and these types of plans would be revenues on one side, uses on the other. So you have sources and uses with some kind of a balancing of the two over time. I think that it's also sets realistic expectations in terms of how much can be done by the public side, because we're looking for the private side to also come through and generate units through inclusionary housing and what have you. I mean, it's not just the public side, but I think it's framing that up, and the level of specificity depends on your app. I think there is a need for latitude to be able to bob and weave as the market evolves. So I think that if we can get through this milestone of understanding what the priorities are, that's the next.
So I guess my question, and I understand that it's not easy, or everyone would be doing it, no one would be talking about this as a problem. But my question is if we don't have some sort of plan, and we sit and look at, from 2010, we look at the housing plan, and things happen, and hey, that's good. And some things don't happen, and we try and figure out, we see a number that's like 1,800 units, and what does that really mean from a perspective of types of units? And how are we going about doing that? And I guess what I'm kind of hearing is that staff will take the strategy that we get, or that gets approved, and then start developing actions that are behind that hopefully they happen. And it's similar to our comp plan, as we went through the comp plan, that it's your best idea with here's what you have at the time, with the data that you have, which changes over time.
Yeah, and that is a good thing to pull in the comp plan as a comparison. These are all things that we want to happen, and we have some strategies and some tools thanks to this plan for how we do it. So it's a way for us to look at what our options are for tackling this problem. And I think we shouldn't discount the value of that needs assessment too. 1,800 units of need over 20 years is a pretty sobering number. But I think that's important for us to know. And even if we can't, combination of build and preserve 1,800 units, if we can do something, then that's something.
And so how long are we contracting with you all to keep these goals moving forward? Or have we just contracted with you to come up with the plan?
It is for the creation of this plan.
Okay.
We have a contract and a scope of work, so if you guys have more things that you would like to see.
So I think, speaking to Pete's point, like so then we just go through our quasi judicial process for implementing specific action items from here forward then. Is that correct? Like as
using the tools, you mean, that they've laid
no,
out?
just like we have an overarching plan and it's very specific. And so then as we have more specific projects, they just come through planning and zoning and then through our normal judicial process with city council.
Sure, I think to provide some clarity, this is setting out some goals that they described of, I think there was 3 there: reducing cost burden households, filling job openings, reducing in commuting, and then strategies that go along with it if you agree with those goals, if that's an appropriate goal that you guys would review. And then, a strategic housing plan is it's in coordination with our comprehensive plan. So staff definitely uses it to guide policymaking going forward. And reviewing projects to see, if it fits within those parameters. And then from this plan would likely also come new policy updates through you and city council if deemed appropriate, based on this data and the adopted action plan.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, Peter.
Go on.
So just to summarize what you guys have said. So these are the guardrails for the comprehensive plan and housing that's embedded in it, correct? This strategic plan these are the guardrails, I guess, right? Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
And again, it's also like a roadmap and giving you ideas what policy you can make.
Right,
Right.
do we go right or left at the stop sign?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, and I guess all that I'd be looking for is like same with the comp plan, once a year.
yeah,
Here's kind of here's how the boat's going, hey, we've been spending a lot of money and we got little teeny bang for our buck. And then we was kind of like the conversation on maybe buy downs or, where do you get the biggest bang for your buck to try to eventually work at that 1,800? I mean, so that you do that.
Clarification, the 93 units per year, that's over 20 years.
Right.
The current acute need is 1,400 units. So talking about 20 years almost is. I mean, it's nice, but what's the most effective of the stuff we talked about that's going to give us the biggest bang for the buck next 3 to 5 years? Because what we saw in 2020 to now is this huge gap that's occurred. And we got to close that gap as fast as possible. So talking about 20 years just seems like, okay, well, it kind of makes us feel like, oh, we have 20 years. We don't have 20 years. Is that right?
Yeah, your reading of the data is right on target.
Yeah, I mean,
And the prioritization of how to take action to create the biggest change possible.
Yeah.
Because there is a large deficit today. And what's reasonable in terms of the resources of the community, in terms of chipping away at that. Now, quickly, can we take big bites or are they going to be more incremental bites?
Yeah, like balancing that urgency with what's achievable and what's
Sure.
realistic.
Right.
Recognizing that, in 2 years, you're not gonna, snap your fingers and meet those 1,300 units, but
Sure.
the urgency is definitely a good read of the data.
what's been the most effective path in communities similar to Glenwood Springs that we talked about earlier in the work session and some of the other communities that has been able to, I'm not saying we're going to achieve 1,300 in 2 or 3 or 5 years, but we could do something better than what it seems like we have achieved in the last 10.
That's a great question. And I think it depends on how much control the city needs to move forward and how much it can leverage the private sector. And I think in Glenwood's case, it's more challenged because the private sector is too busy making money where they're about. And so it's has fewer resources than other communities have in terms of going after it and really leveraging, providing enough of a carrot to get the private sector to come on board and start creating units. So, I think that's a tough question, and I don't want to shoot from the hip here and give you something that is either too vague or inaccurate. But it's a great thing and if you can give us some time to think about in terms of how we actually prioritize. I mean, I think the feedback that we've gotten thus far today has been terrific. And let us sit with that and come back with something a little bit more concrete.
Thank you.
I have another question. Joey kind of spun this on me earlier. So could you talk about, I think a lot of us don't know about the community land trust. Just explain what that is. And, we got brushed over really quick before, and I think a lot of people didn't know what it is.
Sure. Yeah. So a community land trust is basically like a nonprofit community group that will have land holdings and will either, acquire property or build property on that land and, hold that land in the land trust in perpetuity and place deed restrictions on it, and will sell the improvements on the land to a prospective buyer, for example. And typically we'll have restrictions around like the income of the buyer and things like an appreciation cap. So the home can only appreciate 2 to 3% a year. And so the idea is that that land is held in the trust in perpetuity and is taken off of the speculative market, so that the housing remains affordable and can be passed on to people who are of moderate income levels. And that's one application of a community land trust. Like there are other applications, like originally it was used in an agricultural context, but we don't have to get into that.
And just to summarize, I think where I was headed is 2 primary purposes. One is to act as the governing agent around perpetual affordability, where because the land is never linked to the ownership of the condominiumized units, whether it's townhomes, single family homes, or flats, that land enables the CLT to review the transaction. And so there's a permanence of the affordability that is potentially stronger than deed restrictions, although I think over time deed restrictions have held their own. Although we have a little issue down in the French Quarter and in Louisiana right now in terms of questioning deed restrictions relative to STRs, that circuit is dealing with. So a CLT is going to be able to provide a little bit more teeth in terms of long-term affordability. The other is this kind of how do you get in and play in the market with and tie up land as it becomes available. And so it's more of kind of the other end of the spectrum where you're more of a speculative player on behalf of public good. And so you can get and acquire parcels as they become available and then hold them and land bank them until the right P3 opportunity.
And we have, I think I saw a presentation on one that's out of the Front Range that seemed pretty active and did pretty good. So how many is there anyone out in the Western Slope? Any CLT?
Well, I think if I had guessed, you probably were listening to a presentation about the Urban Land Conservancy, which
Yeah.
is a national leader in terms of especially the nimbleness of tying up land or securing land. They have spawned Elevations CLT, which is a Colorado statewide land trust that I think is in its early stages. And I think one of the challenges for us is to figure out, can Glenwood tap into that effort and get its needs addressed? Or is there a need for a localized one, the autonomous, but perhaps more responsive to the
That's what
needs?
everything was good.
Are there any municipalities that are working with local employers? Like what comes to my mind is, Valley View Hospital is a major employer here. RAFTA, these bigger, the school district where they actually combine forces and use that money, but create their own land trust and provide housing in that way.
We're seeing more activity along the lines of major agencies going it alone. They are
Oh.
getting into the housing game. Summit County, for example, some of the medical centers there are very committed in building their own housing. The nature, and I think it's important because at the end of the day, you don't want an entire employment group to work together 40 hours a week and live together another, 24/7.
Boss and the landlord.
As much as our colleagues just thoroughly enjoy each other 24/7, we don't want to necessarily live right next to each other. So I think pooling resources among employers is a terrific idea.
Yeah.
How you allocate dollars in and benefit out has been true.
Right.
And therefore most are
Going it alone.
Yeah.
And in Vale, not to, because I do work over there, but CMC, Eagle County, and Vale Health have all established a partnership. They purchase land. They're building 3 big apartment complexes on them for all 3 of those types of employees. So it does exist, and I do think it can be successful if it's explored properly, like you
Good.
said, it's probably
Yeah.
complicated.
Right. That's a terrific example to add to the mix. So, but it takes a convening entity to spearhead the conversations, and then oftentimes land is the first domino that needs to be played to make the rest of the conversations happen. But with that, and this could either be a CLT or it could be the C. Depends on who has the bandwidth to take those efforts on.
I have one more thing. So
Okay.
No.
really, this is my last one. So you guys did good talking about public engagement, that was part of your strategy for upfront. And I think a big deal for us here, and we have a recent referendum that didn't go maybe the way some people wanted it to go on housing. So I think that it seems like there needs to be something in there with the continued public engagement. And, I think we kind of talked about that in the comp plan, and you talked about this is embedded in the comp plan, but I think education, and it's big enough for us, and, we hear more about it than most everybody, but I think for getting it out to our general public, especially like the needs numbers and because it's a real problem and it's a real thing, but I think we don't understand it well, especially in the community.
I think regarding density bonuses as well,
Mhm.
and just incentivizing and fill. I
Yeah.
think it's important to put some of our money towards education.
Mhm.
If I can add something real quick, is that this is all based on some extensive outreach that staff and consultant team did, and several of you were there. And some people in the audience were there at the rec center where we had really terrific participation. I mean, the room was packed. The energy level was high, lots of opinions expressed. And the awareness of the need is very high. And generally, what we heard was it's time to move forward. We certainly had some people who were concerned about different actions and everyone showed up. So these ideas are not only data driven, everything from EPS is data driven, but they're also grounded in community outreach.
Yeah, I understand it, but I think it's
Yeah.
it's a continual
Oh, yeah,
thing. There's no doubt about it.
absolutely, for sure. It's just trying to build on your.
I get it. I'll make a motion to,
Wait, not yet. I can't motion anything yet. We need to open the floor to public comments and questions. Yes, please step forward and state your name.
So this is just about the plan that you're talking about. Is that correct?
This is for the information we've just been presented. Yeah, if you could state your name and if you're a resident of
Yes,
Glenwood.
I'm Susan Tribble and I live here. And some of my questions, let me see if I can get my notes back up. I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Waller. I think the public does need to know what's going on. I don't think it's accurate that 7 people should be able to decide the fate of the city of Glenwood Springs Incorporated. For the government to continue to overreach, overstep, and control is inappropriate. And I think you all know that a lot of us are pretty fed up with it. So if education is something you guys can do and help people understand what this P&Z thing is all about, because what they are talking about is frightening. There's a lot of things in there that should not be in there and should not even be considered. So now I want to see if I can find, oh, here we go, perfect. So you guys work off of codes and legislation, but the public doesn't think like that. So they need to understand what you guys are doing, and they don't know. We have been dealing with county issues. We've been dealing with school board issues. We've been dealing with health things that are going on. And so every one of us has a position and a place that we have been pushing and trying to get some understanding with. And now we have to deal with the P&Z. It seems like it just never ends. It's constant. There was a little segment in there about the hotels being used for housing. And isn't it correct that the Aspen Ski Company came down from Aspen, bought up, I think, at least I know of 2 of our hotels, and they're housing their people there. Well, that didn't help us, but we allowed them to come in for at what, you know, I don't understand that. Like, that should have been something we thought of. I think we need to tell Aspen, Pickens County, and the Aspen Land Trust to stop pushing their problems down to us. I think the other thing that we have to really consider is we talked about commuters, but how many people actually don't want to live in Glenwood and would prefer to commute versus how many commute and would like to live in Glenwood? And then what are those income levels that we're talking about? Because what is the abbreviation, the average, median, what is your
AMI.
AMI? Does that really apply? And then the 1.3 to 1.5 million to C, I do remember it, but I don't remember it, right? Because we voted, I obviously wouldn't have voted it in because that's a tax increase, but I don't understand. I really liked what you said, Miss White, about those funds being able to actually help the people instead of going into the government's coffers. Because it's slush funds, and we all know what it is. Most of the people, we know what it is. But if you're really gonna help the people, that's a great idea. And then these homes, how big are these homes? You mentioned the two building things that are taking place currently at the rivers, and then there was another one you mentioned on
At the
Midland
minutes.
Avenue. So how many housing units are those? I think you said 800, right? No?
Yeah, I think it's,
Can you not talk to me or am
I don't know, can I talk?
Why not? This
We,
can be
we
a
prefer
dialogue.
not to have,
Well, anyway, whatever you
question and answer
said,
on the record.
that should apply against the number that they're trying to tell you you need to have. That would make more sense. And then last but not least, how large are these homes? How many people can actually fit in them? And who is it that you want to fit in them? Because that is just as important as trying to hit the 1,800 that they're talking about. I think this really needs investigation. I don't think this is a decision that you 7 should make tonight. And then the rest of us feel the impact for 20 years. I'll use your number. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public that would care to comment? And I can't tell if there's anyone online or not.
Double check.
I see a head shake down there, so apparently not. So we'll close the public comment period and bring it back up to the commission here for, I believe we're looking for this is an action item, so we're looking for a motion on the strategic housing plan update.
So I have a comment, so. Or just kind of throw it out there, is that, so we're not approving this tonight, all we're doing is making a recommendation to go to city council, is
That's correct.
that correct?
And I would add that we're looking for direction on the policies to move forward, which would come back to you. So there's the strategic housing plan update, the document. And then per our grant funding, we are to be looking at some of those strategy policies for possible implementation. So if you have comments on those strategies, which I'm happy to list off again, because that is what staff would be looking at to fulfill our commitment in bringing that back forward from our grant.
Could we see the strategies again?
Yes, so it'll take me a minute to bring up, but I can do that. So this is the full list of they're called in the state's terms, approved or qualifying strategies. They have these 16 strategies. Happy to read them off for you if you want, but they cover pretty wide ground, things that are kind of strictly like what you would find in land use codes, and some things are more kind of policies or programs that cities might engage in.
And so to clarify on this, our specific grant, we identified 4 strategies that we informed DOLA that we would be looking at, which include the vacant land, city vacant land for affordable housing, density bonus, the land banking or land acquisition, dedicated funding sources, and the preservation component. So you guys saw those all presented. Those are the strategies that EPS researched, and then we also added on to for the strategic housing plan. So direction on some of those, that's what we're looking for tonight.
So did some of our conversation that we have earlier, did that give you some direction, or do we need to rehash? stuff we.
I think we'll certainly be looking at the polls that we took with EPS to see where some of those votes landed. But if you had comments that you wanted to put on the record, if you think there are good policies to go after, that would be helpful.
I think it was important to note just what was discussed in terms of affordability, that new development is so much more expensive than preservation. And so I guess I would just like to reiterate for the record that that it seems prudent to really, really push towards preservation.
Am I understanding this correctly that, so those 4 that you identified, they were part of the application process? Is that right? That we've kind of come through? Okay. And I'm also understanding this, that we're not, or the city's not necessarily married to those 4 initial strategies in that application. So we can, down the road, learn through this process and make some of those course corrections down the road with that grant still in place. Thank you.
So will this come to us on an annual basis or something like, for other feedback? And I know you've kind of done that in the past. Anna or Watkins to kind of go through, I mean, to the point of here's what we've learned and here's what's changed. Because I mean, you could go through all these strategies and, and they're all good, but they're good at different times, maybe depending on what you got going on.
I think if the P and Z so requests, we can do that. Some of the things that we have done in the past, or Hannah has done in the past, it's kind of already along these veins. I know we've had some kind of housing update chats where we shared information and data. So we've done some of that already, and we can continue doing that, I think.
So is this I kind of heard a 5-year plan. I think that's what I heard them say, but then, there's 20 years, but then the last one was done in 2010. So it's 13. So it is the window we're looking at like a 5-year window with this, or is it kind of linked to the comp plan that every 10 years we kind of update this plan as we do the comp plan?
I think 5 years is probably an appropriate interval to at least revisit it. Because we all know that things can change in 5 years. 5 years ago, where were we all? Saw where we were, where we would be today.
Well, I guess what I would like to request, and I don't know if everyone agrees with this, but I would like to see maybe 3 months or something like that after you kind of get a handle of what are the key projects you think you're going to be working on for the next year, 2 years. And I think Matt kind of mentioned that it would be good to kind of see that. And then I would like to see a once a year update of how we're, how we're doing, what works, what doesn't work. And, I guess that's what I would like to see. I don't know.
Sure.
Sure,
you.
that sounds great.
Yeah, I would agree, getting. It's such a moving target. It's always in flux and change, and the needs are today are not going to be necessarily the needs of tomorrow, and the satisfaction of those needs is always a moving target, seems to me. So, do we have a motion to make a recommendation to City Council?
I'll make a motion to recommend to City Council that we move this forward.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Waller
I'll second.
and a second from Commissioner White. Further discussion?
I would just say it's very admirable that the city considers this a priority and that we are very proactive in trying to bridge the gap. I think that the education that we have put out and the community engagement we have garnered through our comp plan has been exemplary. And I just really appreciate that we're trying to create a community that can house people, and it's a regional problem. It's huge. So good job.
Okay, so what is our system for voting? Are we still voting by voice, or do we have a?
We're electronic.
We are, okay. I will call the question. Oh. Didn't vote.
I did not.
How do I vote?
Now,
Pushing everybody.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, I think in an attempt to vote, I turned my mic off.
Do they work now? If we try to turn them on? No, you just took yours.
Thank you, gentlemen. Can you, Mylan?
I moved it in control over here. I think you press.
Well,
Oh.
So maybe if you close this.
There you go.
It'd be on.
Oh,
You had it.
I had it for a second. No, I won't do it. Okay, great. All right, moving on. Item 7B, planning item 2723, Habitat for Humanity Administrative Site Architectural Plan Review. And who do we have presenting that? Is that Watkins again?
yours truly.
It is. Great. Watkins, you have the floor.
You have slides, okay. Tonight we're here now to talk about the Habitat for Humanity 8th and Midlands Site Architectural Plan Review. I have some slides for you, and then as usual, I'll go through my presentation. If you have any questions, please ask them. Then we'll give the applicants an opportunity to say some words. They'll have more opportunity for questions. We'd like to take public comment all amongst yourselves, and we'll be looking for a motion. So this is an administrative site architectural plan review, which normally means that the planning director, or Hannah, would make a decision on this. In this case, Hannah has made the decision to refer it to you all, to P&Z. And so you all are the deciding body on this. What is proposed is 8 residential units in 3 buildings, and we'll get into some of the details of this plan here. We'll be talking about the details of the their open space, their landscaping plan, all the kind of details that you normally see in these proposals that come to you. But I want to start first with something that we don't usually talk about, which is incentives and flexibility, which is permitted by the code in section 070-4580, which is that the city may consider flexible application design standards, including but not limited to minimum lot size, building height, lot coverage, impervious coverage, setbacks, and landscaping. This is an incentive for affordable housing that's available. And so what this means is you can apply flexible standards to the code's strict standards. As we'll discuss here tonight, not every aspect of Habitat's application meets the strict standards of the code. I'm going to discuss the ones that don't. And so you all, Planning and Zoning Commission, have the authority to say, yes, we want to apply flexibility here and not require the strict standards of the code to be met in each of these cases. In other cases, we, as staff, are suggesting that that they change some aspect of their project through conditions of approval. And I'll go ahead and say that 3 areas in particular that we're looking at that we're recommending applying flexibility on are the front yard setback, the required planting strips, and building orientation of 3 buildings. Start by talking about building materials. What are proposed are some kind of composite materials, which you see on the slide here. They are not wood, but they kind of look like wood. And then you have some corrugated metal also as accent materials. Building orientation, it refers to how the building, whether it faces the street or which direction it faces. And this site is interesting because it has frontage with 8th Street, Cowden Drive in Midland. So it has a lot of street frontage. And we see in building A, which has frontage along Cowden and 8th Street, the entrance is actually oriented toward the west. Building B, which moves to the west from building A, has frontage along 8th Street, but the entrances are oriented toward the east. Building C, so I don't have that on the slide. Building C is oriented toward the nearest, the frontage that it is on, which is Midland. Architectural features of 4-sided design requirement in our design standards. This refers to having an architectural feature can be something like a window or a door opening, something that provides visual interest. There are a minimum required number of architectural features on each side of the building. So even if it's a side that's not visible from the public, it's still required to have 5. And so in this case, there is one elevation, one side of one building, building A, the east side, where we are recommending in the conditions of approval to include an additional architectural feature so that it does meet the standard for all sides of all buildings. And now we're going to talk about transition to existing residential structures, or specifically homes. You can see on the site plan here, on the lower part is building C, which is the building that's farthest to the west on the site. To the up and to the left, which is the northwest, there's an existing 1-story home. And above it, kind of to the north and a little bit to the east, is a structure, but that's not a home. And so we're not applying residential or transition standards to that structure. With the 1-story home, it's separated by a good distance. It's also kind of located quite a bit to the east of that home. So it's staff's opinion that the transition standards shouldn't apply to that building. If you all disagree, site flexibility is also available as it is for all the other design standards. The trash enclosure is located along Cowden Drive, and it is the structure which does not meet setback requirements. It's about 4.5 feet from the front property line. And so staff is recommending applying flexibility for that standard. They meet the common open space requirements. Part of the design includes a picnic area that's in the northwest corner of the site along Midlands. Landscaping plan. This is missing a couple of street trees along Cowden. The code has requirements for the number of street trees per amount of frontage on a given road that it has. So it meets that for 8th Street and for Midland. Staff is recommending adding the 2 street trees that it needs along Cowden. And then a minor detail is that in the parking lot specific landscaping, there doesn't need to be 1 tree added to there. We're recommending that as well. Planting strip, which I've alluded to a little bit, I should define it for you guys. Planting strip is a 5-foot wide landscaping piece of ground that separates the sidewalk from the street. So when people talk about detached sidewalks, that's another term that's kind of similar here. That separation between the sidewalk and the street is what we're getting at. And so in the projects, they've included a 3-foot planting strip, so that doesn't quite meet requirements on the Cowden side. we're recommending applying flexibility for that. And then along the 8th and Midland side, you guys are probably familiar with this, this sidewalk. There's a nice wide, I think it's a 10-foot sidewalk that's there. It has a planting strip, but the planting strip kind of tapers from a maximum width of 7 feet down to 0. So that technically doesn't meet code. I think this is a great place to apply flexibility though, because it's a great sidewalk. It's already a path that you can use to access the rec center and Glenwood Meadows. Parking, let's talk about. For multifamily developments, parking requirements are 1.5 parking space per dwelling unit, and then 1 parking space per guest, or 1 guest parking space for every 5 units. And that comes out to 14 if you do the math, and 14 is the number that they require here, so they do meet the requirements. In terms of traffic impact, we didn't receive comments from CDOT or engineering related to parking, to the traffic, excuse me. There's a recent traffic study that the city helped fund that was done by Kimley Horn that took into account development on this side as well as the district in general. And that parking study considered a development on this site that's basically identical to what's here. So that recent parking study does take into account this development as if it existed already. Found no impact and no need for upgrades to the intersection. This is an affordable housing project. So 100% of the 8 units will be deed restricted to 80% of AMI. AMI again being area median income. And to give you a sense of what that means, if it's affordable at 80% AMI, that means it's affordable for a family of 4 that earns about $99,000 a year, or for a family of 2 that earns $79,400. And all of these units will be for sale also. We think that this does meet the goals and the future land use map of the comprehensive plan. It's shown in the future land use map as multifamily residential. We received some comments, some kind of minor comments from our referral agencies about grading, drainage, from our public works and engineering departments. These are kind of minor comments that we feel can be accommodated in the final plans review, which is the next stage of the projects. Comments from our police chief that noted that parking is an issue in this neighborhood. So the code has requirements or criteria rather for approving site architectural plans like these, and I will read these out to you. Criteria 1 is that the site architectural plan is consistent with the general purpose and intent of this code, which staff believes that it is. The site architectural plan is consistent with the dimensional standards, design, development, and all other standards of the code. We think this will be with the conditions of approval as recommended, and if flexible approach is applied to some of the strict standards of the code that it doesn't meet. The site architectural plan is not in conflict with precedent land use approvals. Staff doesn't know of any conflicts there. And then the last standard is that the site architecture plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other adopted city policies and plans, and we believe that it is. Therefore, staff does recommend approval of it with the findings kind of referring back to these criteria that I just read to you. In the packet, I'll refer to the packet for the specific conditions of approval, but they included some things that I've mentioned already, changes to the landscaping plan, an additional architectural feature on building A, and street trees along Cowden Drive. So P&Z's options tonight are to approve with conditions, deny, or continue the action item. Staff recommends approval with the conditions and findings on the staff report. I have some alternative motions that you all can consider that we can go back to if you guys need to. And that is it for me. So I'll happy to take any questions you all have about this project. Excuse me, I should mention also some public comment that I've gotten just in the last day. If I can summarize it for you, I did put I did put these letters in front of you all, but let me summarize it for you all. One neighbor had some comments about the intersection, the Cowden intersection, and how that kind of works or doesn't work so well for cyclists. Recommending some intersection improvements. Also suggesting that the snow storage area is not adequate. Suggesting the trash enclosure needs walls that go to the full height. And mitigating standard things like developer mitigating construction noise and dust. And then another letter that we received kind of alludes to the parking situation in the neighborhood being crowded, and highlights some concerns about additional development in the city, I would say. So that's all I have for you. Happy to take questions now.
Great, thanks, Watkins.
Are these side-by-side townhomes or are they up and down?
So they're actually 3 separate buildings.
Okay,
And so they're kind of apartment buildings in the 3 that are there, but the 3 buildings aren't attached.
Could you put up a site plan?
Yeah.
Watkins, it's 8 units, right? Not 9?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay. But it could be 9.
There is,
Storage.
based on the lot standards, it could support 9 units.
According to the code.
Yes, ma'am.
So could you explain the buildings or what's on there on the site plan?
Yeah. So can you see my mouse a little bit?
Yeah.
This is building A, which is farthest to the east.
Mhm.
And then you move west, the letters go up. This is building B. This is building C. This is a carport where most of the parking is. It's covered. It looks like it's one carport, but they are kind of separated. And then this is the trash enclosure here. So this is Cowden right here, which it exits onto. There's no vehicular access to either Midland Drive or to 8th Street. This is the sidewalk that exists there now.
And that's a planting strip between there and the curb,
That's right.
and that is existing.
Yes, sir. There's my mouse. So it's about 7 feet wide here at its widest, and you can see that it tapers.
Which way is building A facing then? Where's the?
The entrance to the units faces this way to the
Okay.
west.
And the developers are gonna present as well, right? We'll get to.
Yep.
Is that,
So my,
is that planting strip irrigated?
That is a good question. I believe it is irrigated because I don't think that it dries up at all in the summer.
By the city or?
It is city property. Yep.
and what is the deed restriction gonna look like for these for sale units? Will there be a cap on appreciation, or is it just AMI? Do they need to be resident occupied?
They will need to be resident occupied. There will be a cap on AMI, or a sales appreciation cap.
And do we know what that cap is? Is it 3% or?
It'll be 80% AMI.
Is it it's Garfield County's?
I think that can be deferred to the applicant, and we've also signed an MOU with them outlining details of the deed restriction that Habitat can probably speak to.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
And is this property owned? Who owns the property now?
This is currently a city owned.
City owned now.
Yes, sir.
So if we have questions about landscaping, and that's not for you,
No,
is that right?
If you have questions about what's required for landscaping, you can ask me.
Yeah, so I'd like to see them put up the landscaping plan. Because I had some questions on that I saw from what they had and on the landscaping plan, and kind of, I just want to try to understand it further.
I don't have that for you to be able to put on the screen. Would it be possible to kind of talk through it though?
See, there's a copy of it here.
where it said one tree.
the
that
developer's gonna present it, is my assumption,
Well,
right?
will the applicant have will you have the architectural plans that you could talk to?
unfortunately, through the perfect storm of email, we do not have the presentation that we could show that, so we're not going to be able to demonstrate the landscape plan. But we can respond to any of the questions you might have about the plan.
If you give me just a moment, I should be able to share it from my computer. So continue talking while I deal with technology
Okay,
again.
yeah, I mean, I'll just, couple questions I had was that. We're crowded right in there. I mean, it meets everything, but it's jamming a lot of stuff, the old 5-pound comment. So a question I have is, because 8th and Midland are major roads. I know I live on Walls, so I drive by there all the time. And so is there any, it looks like it's just open, and I'm talking to you versus them because they'll come up later, but it looks like there's no fence or there's nothing. So as you come by there, it's just open, and I saw that you had 5 trees that are in that landscaping or that planting strip along 8th Street, right?
Yep, that sounds like the number. And as you move up where the planting strip kind of tapers, some of the trees are on the other side of the sidewalk. but there
Yeah,
are
then I
still
showed,
trees.
I see some there, and then I know you kind of talked about doing a second tree there on Cowden. They didn't have that, they didn't show that in their landscaping plan, so I'm assuming that that's an added thing. And so I guess one of my questions is there any fencing or anything, or is it just shrubbery breakage between 8th Street and the hardscape of the housing?
Between 8th Street and the buildings, there are no fences. And if
Okay.
there were fences, they would have to meet our fence standards, which would make them kind of low fences. They wouldn't be able to be taller than about 4 feet.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like the project over there. I don't know if it's called Cottonwood or whatever. Midland and 27, those townhomes there, but okay. Yeah, it would be good. And then, yeah, I kind of like the idea of the fencing around the traffic or the trash enclosure. So is there, and I couldn't tell by the plan, maybe there is fencing around there, is there, or is it just a trash dumpster right out there in the open?
There is fencing around it. I think the public comments was that it should go all the way up to the roof because there's a roof over it also. But there is fencing.
Oh, there's a roof over that.
There is.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't see that.
The code standard for fencing around trash enclosures is that it shall be sufficient to enclose, to block from view the trash enclosure. So there's not there is a maximum height, not taller than 6 feet for trash for screening the trash enclosures. So, I think it does block the trash enclosures, at least in the renderings, the materials that they've showed us.
But we don't have any picture of here's the height of that. Or so, okay. Yeah, it would be good if she could get that. I'd like to. And I guess that, you talked about having there be a lighting plan. And I think I read that that there was only lights on the buildings and nothing else. I think that's what I read in
There is
probably
also,
from their report, but then when I see one of the drawings, it shows a light out in the area. So I think that was one of your conditions though that you asked for, as a lighting.
that's right, and that's pretty standard. We don't often see lighting plans at this stage. And the reason for that is because it's not too difficult for applicants to put lights in to move lights. Just because you need a light in one place, usually you don't need to move a building in order to do that. So that's the kind of detail that we usually see in final plan review.
Yeah, because I thought I read that there's only lights on the building. So I'm just trying to understand. Do you know if there is a parking lot lights, or is it?
The code does require some parking lot lighting. So we'll see, we'll see that in the.
So there are. Okay, so that's different than what was said in the report. Yeah, I mean, that would be something I'd be interested in seeing, would be knowing what the lighting plan is. And then
Pete, there is a rendering of the trash enclosure
yeah,
Yeah.
in
we just
there.
I just kind of saw it.
What page is that?
So does that, it looks like that goes up to the top of the. Yes,
Okay, the
preliminary
price of
plan.
parking.
it looks like it's high enough to cover the trash.
One of the-
It is, yeah.
Okay, another question I have is there an HOA here? Do you know?
I think that can be a better question for the applicant to answer, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it might be a good time if the applicant would care to come forward and present. And please state your name for the record.
I'm Richard Shaw, and I'm representing Habitat for Humanity as a community planner. And we will attempt to answer all the questions that have just been asked in more detail. But I'd like to start by talking a little bit more conceptually about the project and what we're trying to achieve. And what that is to develop something that is extraordinarily difficult to do in today's economic climate, as the presentation before us really began to represent. This is 1/2 acre of city-owned land that we are proposing to develop 8 residential units on. And the target that we would be looking for is 80% of AMI as the target for the acquisition of future residents of these individual units. Habitat has a particular formula that is so unique, which is the sweat equity that goes into a project like this. And the standard is 250 hours per adult. And so that becomes very much a design parameter that we're hoping to achieve. Looking at the site and the overall neighborhood, it's quite an eclectic group of residential areas. And we had a choice because of the zoning to put this together as a 3-story project. After looking at the neighborhood and the characteristics of the site, it seemed really important that we break this into individual units so that the majority of the project was a 2-story project. Not only because of the fit with the neighborhood, but because of the livability that represents to the future. The design has really focused on how you would make this a good place to live. That's why we've achieved the code requirement for parking. That's why there are carports associated with it that provide the weather protection, that make it possible to have the full parking component. That's why the organization of the units has stairs to the outside so that people are not walking past others' bedrooms. That's why the amount of storage that's on the site has been increased dramatically over the amount in the code. We ended up here with a site of over 13 feet of grade change top to bottom. Instead of building retaining walls, what we have concluded to do is put a basement that is a walk-in basement storage for the residential unit. That, of course, is one of the great needs in any of the community housing. We already had mentioned earlier on, this is 100% community housing. So this is a very exceptional attempt at creating the right site plan and architecture to make this a very strong and lasting project for Glenwood Springs. The materials we've spoken about generally are composite materials. They're used both as an overall view of what those materials are in the architectural elevations, but also as accent. And that's going to deliver a really beautiful design character for the project. And I don't know if you were able to find.
Watkins actually can pull up some documentation on a flash drive if you want to present any of your application materials.
Yeah, I think if we could get to the landscape plan and talk a little bit about the fencing. There are actually screen fences for a portion of the outdoor space.
site plan?
Yeah, we could see the site plan and then follow that by the.
Sure. Double sharing the screen. Yeah, that's what I'm working on. Any idea of me? Yeah. Just maximize it for you.
So I'd start here by answering the questions that we heard initially. On these residential units, they have both patios and they have balconies. So that everybody who would live here would have a south facing or a west facing outdoor space that would relate to the living area inside. There is a significant amount of traffic on Midland on this particular portion. And we thought the best solution to that would be to extend the architecture and have screen walls that would come along the side of the buildings so that there would be an opportunity to create privacy along that side and then reinforce that with plant material that would act as hedges. And that would be on the ground level along Midland, generally as an approach to the landscape and fencing. The trash enclosure is a full-on fence. It would be a foot of gap at the bottom. It would have 4 feet of fencing to the top, and then it has a roof, which is the extension of the carport that would come over the top of it. So it would be weather protected from snow. It would be really invisible from the neighborhood. So don't think about this as a dumpster sitting out in the street at all. It would have doors that would open and close, allowing the residents to have access to the dumpster area. The request about the setback has come about because we want to make sure that the trash truck does not have to enter the property and the project and thereby back into Cowden, back close to the intersection. So the best place that we could find to make the trash work was to put it on the street side, enclose it visually, and then allow for the trash pickup to take place without the trash truck going very deeply into the project. The street trees initially were not included along Cowden. There are 2 that have been suggested here by the code. We have dry wells that are located in that general area, and the dry wells are taking space along that side because it's low relative to the overall property. But in looking at this, we think we can add the additional trees that the code would request. Perhaps there were other questions. Those are the ones that I had noted in the earlier discussion that we could address.
Are you done with your presentation?
Yeah, I think he's asking questions.
Yeah. Simply said, we have worked closely with the staff. We think this is.
Could you put up the landscaping plan?
Yeah. Actually, I don't see that in this file. Yeah, here we go. we have indicated here something that is difficult to show in plan view. But the back of the carports also have both planting and screen walls against the neighbors adjacent to them. At the very along Midland, for example, this is area that is landscaped. There's, we think the most important thing to incorporate in the planting design is shade trees, so that we have good climate control. We have the outdoor spaces that will be protected from the summer sun. I mentioned the hedges and the areas around the outdoor spaces, which are incorporated. The screening of the parking lot is going to, on the basis of the condition of the staff report, be enhanced as well. The common area that we think is going to be well used by residents is at the very western side of the property, where there's the seating area and a gathering space at the upper corner, which is a little bit higher in elevation, but is a level area.
Zoom in here. I can ask a question while you're pulling up that landscaping report. So it sounds like there will be some parking in carports. Will those be dedicated spaces to residents? And if so, will there be guest parking? It seems like there's some pretty massive concern with parking in the area.
The residential parking will be assigned to a limited unit. It will be done based on the proximity, so the parking will be related to where the entrance to the unit would be located. Watkins had mentioned the code requirement, and that includes the guest parking in that code requirement. So achieving 14 parking spaces we thought was important, particularly to not exasperate any parking that would be in the neighborhood generally.
So it would essentially look like 8 dedicated spaces, and then the remaining would be guest parking.
Yes. Well, that's not quite correct. It'd be unassigned parking.
Unassigned,
Yes.
correct.
14 spaces total.
That's correct.
And then are they gonna be able to still pull out onto Midland like you can now off that property, or no?
I'm sorry, didn't quite hear.
So, sorry. Can you pull out onto, you know how you can pull onto Midland currently? Maybe that's a question for you, Watkins, I don't know.
You can currently pull on it
Or Ace, sorry, whoops.
from Cowden. The only vehicular entrance and exit is on Cowden.
Okay, but right now, yeah, I'm pretty sure right now they can pull out onto,
Right, so they'll pull out onto Cowden and
Okay.
travel a pretty short distance, and then you can turn left or left or right onto it is. It kind of quickly turns to Midland.
that, I mean, so I guess that gets pretty busy there, especially in the morning, or if there's some sort of detour or something like that, and what have you guys taken into account, like them trying to get out safely?
Yes, in looking at the update of the traffic report, I think
Yeah.
there are kind of 3 or 4 important items. The first was the original report assumed the density or the cap of the density that is here on the property. So all the planning that the city has done has the same apples to apples number of residential units. The intersection is very ill-defined now because the completion of the roadway did not move into Cowden. So the completion of this project then creates a curb line and a really direct entry into the project. The entry to the project is physically as far back from the intersection as it can fit. So those are all good improvements in the geometry of the intersection. And finally, the curb line and the median and the formality of the sidewalk that will be added doesn't actually exist anywhere else on Cowden on this side of the street. So those will become urban design features that will direct traffic and make it much easier to understand how to travel and make the turns. And the final point, I think, that the traffic study that we've completed indicates is the turning movements are within the standards that you would have expected. They are the addition of 8 residential units, and that has been planned for overall in the traffic system.
Thank you.
And I have a question on the traffic plan. I know I read Boundaries traffic report, and it refers to Kimley Horn's report, and which was done just recently, January 23. And I saw that, yeah, I mean, it went down and looked all the way to 8th in Colorado and 8th in Pitkin, I think, but it said in here, I think, that there was not any specific reference done at 8th and Cowden. In fact, I'm looking at it right here, pulling up your report. And so I guess one thing that'd be interesting to me would be, you know, to just hear if that's a deal, as we had more people there to just specifically look at that. And I'm trying to recall as I read through engineering and public works and police, if there's anything on that. But anyway, I guess that would be something I'd be interested in. Maybe I need to save that for later. But I don't know if
And if the applicant wants to answer from the city side, the Kimley Horn study that we conducted did account for 8 units at this location. We included it in their study so that they would analyze that parcel as a whole. And then the applicant was asked to submit the additional traffic letter that met that.
yeah, and all that I'm saying is it looked like that report that was done in January did not though look at that intersection. I mean, it looked at the number of units being there, and that was there. So that's just kind of assuming that that's good. Anyway, that's what I'm asking about.
Yeah, Bill Harris, Boundaries Unlimited.
Exactly.
That's true. That Kimley Horn report was a regional report for a big portion of Glenwood Springs, and it did incorporate 8 units on that particular parcel. So that was included into their numbering. And so they did specifically look at that intersection and didn't deem that there was any improvements that were necessary.
What's your thought on that? Of specifically looking at that intersection by adding
Well,
8
I mean,
units?
you know, I think we've got stacking distance between the intersection, our entrance of about 3 vehicles and stuff. So, I mean, that's, you know, that's well within the norm. Yeah, it's like any place in town. Yeah, we would love to improve the Jesus side of things, but you know, like I say, it was specifically looked at by Kimley Horn, and they didn't come up with any needed recommendations for improvement.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Seeing no further questions up here, I'll
I have
open.
another
I have one.
Oh,
I'm gonna
I-
interrupt Pete. He has been talking for a while.
Oh,
Could you just go over the deed restriction again? I know you said 80% AMI. How does that affect a homeowner when they go to sell? I know that they have to live in town. And they have to meet the income requirements. So when they sell, there's a cap to appreciation. What is that cap?
That's correct. There would be a cap on appreciation. We have set it at 3% for the cost of living CPI.
Thank you.
My question is about an HOA and specifically, I guess my question is, and I've had some experience, not in the good way on this, is that you have the dry wells there, and I know reading the engineering report and also questions from Public Works and whatnot is maintenance of the dry wells is a big deal. I think it was recommended an annual inspection and caring for it and all that sort of thing. And I've seen instances in the past where people where groups did not do that and it created a problem in the future. So is there an HOA that you're doing, Tim?
Yeah, we're anticipating and the normal kind of documents that would establish an HOA with specific powers and responsibilities for the entire community. So that's going to include the kind of thing you just mentioned, but there are other issues associated with the 8 units that the HOA documents will cover.
I can help with answering this question. My name is Carol.
Please. Oh, sorry.
My name is Carolyn Meadowcroft. I'm the Homeowner Services Director for Habitat. And I live in the Glenwood Springs area. So there will be an HOA established. There absolutely has to be one because these are condominiums. And so the land is owned as a common element. So the HOA owns the land and then covers the exterior insurance, all the maintenance and everything of the home. With our previous projects, we have had a reserve study done upfront to determine what the cost of the HOA dues would be. We've already factored that into our calculations when we determine what the sales prices would be, assuming some numbers based on our previous projects. But with those particular things that would need to be considered, that would be information that the HOA would look at and would be included in the reserve study. We previously have used property management companies to establish the homeowners association, get everything off the ground, manage things up to the point that there's the adequate percentage of homeowners that have purchased homes. And then we would gradually move in homeowners into the board of directors. And at that point, Habitat would step away, once the homes had all been sold. We've done this in our project in Basalt Vista, and we've been relatively successful and implementing the same process in our project that we're doing right now in Rifle Wapiti Commons.
Thanks, Carolyn.
That cover it?
Will people be tasked to recertify that they're well, I guess, never mind, my question doesn't make sense. Because they don't have to work in Glenwood, correct? Just be residents of Glenwood.
No, actually, at the initial selection of a homeowner. So kind of to give you a little bit of an idea of how we work. Typically, our homeowners are selected by an application process that they submit to Habitat. We have a committee of local people that have some various qualifications for reviewing applications and understanding real estate and understanding the mortgage process. And we select our homeowners, and they are required to be employed in the city of Glenwood Springs as the first priority. Then we would step back if we did not have enough homeowners that were qualified and eligible to for all of our homes, and we would step back and look at homeowners that were employed in the 81601 zip code. And then, assuming that we didn't have enough to cover, we would, go even further back. We anticipate there'll be more than enough applications. So they would be required to be employed within the city of Glenwood Springs or the 81601 to be selected. It is not our intent, however, for that to always be the requirement. This is a forever home. If someone leaves their employment in Glenwood Springs, our intent is not to make them leave their home. It would just be at the time that they would initially be selected. Now, if they were to leave and not be employed within our incorporated area, which is from Parachute to Aspen, which is the Colorado River Valley and the Roaring Fork Valley. If they were no longer employed within that area, then they would have to come back to Habitat and sell the home back to us. So they could not keep it as a rental. They could not use it as a VRBO. They could not do any of that. It must be their primary residence. That is part of the deed restriction.
And does that apply to income requirements as well? Say somebody lands a great job 3 years after they purchase a unit.
We do not go back and recertify them
okay.
every year. They have
That's
to meet
great.
the criteria when they're selected. We would hope that people would be successful and that they would, be able to get a better job or make more money. And, you know, ideally, that at some point they would then be able to afford free market. And that they would then come back to us to sell the home, because they could purchase a free market home and not need the affordable housing.
Thank you.
Will you guys have units for handicap or ADA or for one unit, or is it just maybe?
We do try to build ADA compliant, not
Okay.
necessarily ADA accessible, because there's a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah.
But
And one of the parking spaces is an ADA accessible parking space.
So Carolyn, I mean, with the HOA, I mean, what I'm hearing you're just saying is that all the systems, all the maintenance systems and all of that stuff will be included in there so that everyone's protected going forward for the
Yeah.
detention ponds and all that.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very important thing, that as Habitat has been developing larger developments, more than just one home at a time, we've been realizing how important having a homeowners association is, to obviously cover some of those things that are common elements that need to be maintained, but also for general maintenance of the development, so that it's always stays looking good and everyone shares in that expense to maintain the entire subdivision.
I have one more question, but I think it's more about the principles that were in the packet. Just, I guess it was in engineering, just meeting all the principles or the suggestions of the principles, such as stormwater quality, the entire site for planning for water quality treatment, et cetera. Is that a question that I would ask?
Yes, I will confess, I don't know quite what you're referring to as the principles, but the stormwater management plan, dry wells, the direction,
Yeah.
the collection and so forth, would meet all of the principles of Glenwood Springs water plan and management. Is there one?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the stormwater is pretty much conveyed to it's a two dry well system that has a field of rock all around it, and this is all integrated into the ground. Obviously, that's why it's called a dry well system, because it's allowed to percolate into the ground. One of those particular dry wells, that's the stormwater treatment dry well, whereby any refuse that comes in is allowed to collect on a surface before waters are allowed to go ahead and percolate into the ground. There's also like fabric systems that will absorb oils and stuff like that. And so, I mean, it's a system that, you know, there are quite a few systems like that in the city and, you know, throughout the county, for sure.
Thank you.
I have a question on the,
The lighting.
what is the price? Exactly.
I knew you were going there.
Yeah, on the lighting study, because I mean, what I read in the report was kind of different than what Watkins kind of talked about. So could you talk about the lighting?
Yes.
And I don't necessarily need to see the plan, but
Yeah.
here's kind of where the fixtures are and that sort of thing.
The way we've approached this is we need to have lighting that will be done off of the building at the major entrances and along the pedestrian routes. We did not see the need for additional freestanding lighting that would take place in and around the structures. Also on Midland, there's an existing lighting program, which is there. Those are street lights, and those of course would be continued to be illuminating the front of the project. We did say in the narrative of the report that there would be little or no additional lighting that would take place. And at the final approval, we would have a lighting plan completed, which is the way we intended to approach that.
Thank you.
Well, finally, from the applicant's point of view, we feel like there is really an opportunity here in this project. And that we have tried to create the most livable environment for the long-term health and benefit of the community and the residents who will be the future people who participate in this development, and they will be participants in it because of their amount of labor that will go into the creation of this project. We have really done, I think, the best we could with the shape of the site, the topography, and the conditions that exist in the neighborhood to create an infill project that would be a good one for the entire neighborhood. As a result of that, this flexibility idea that has been suggested and been talked about both with the applicant and is in the staff would be very helpful in achieving that project. And we hope you see it the same way. Thank you so much.
Well, please, thank you. And we'll now open the floor to questions and comments from the public. Anyone that wants to speak, please come forward. We'd like to, do we have a timer? We often have a 3-minute timer for comments.
Yes, good evening. My name is Richard Todd, and I live at 616 Cowden Drive. And I built my house there about 10 years ago, following the development of Bracking Club, where we had a condominium. And we like being on the river, and we found a couple of huts on this plot. We built our dream home. At the time, the place was pretty run down, and also we had a bit of a stink every day from across the river. But I knew at the time, dealing with city engineer Mike McDill, that that was going to be relocated. Indeed, I just had a new valuation on my property, and they put it up by another 450,000. Which is, I wouldn't mind that if as the sewage works gone. But unfortunately, it's now become a dumping ground for all the waste material from the meadows, the digging up the roads. I was a little surprised actually to find that you're going to build on that piece of land, particularly because when the sewage works left, there's 3 24-inch pipes which come under the 8th Street Bridge, and I believe cut across that land. And the reason I was surprised was because when I tried to build my house, there was a 15-foot easement for the sewage pipe at the back of my house, so where I couldn't build. So I was a little surprised when they talk about building on that. I trust the city engineers looked at where those pipes are located, because I say all 3 of them come from the pumping station. Regarding traffic, they have actually, I got a notice probably a year ago now, where they're putting yellow lines down Cowden Drive, and also around the corner from Cowden Drive, mainly because the fire department couldn't get a fire engine down there. And so they're very concerned about that. But clearly that is an issue. And that bit of land, until the 2 concrete blocks were placed, was used as a parking spot by the residents of the adjacent condominium. I'm not very happy to be able to thinking about driving down the road at the moment. Okay, it's a weedy mess at the moment with big concrete pillars to stop people from driving on it. And now I'm a little concerned about what I'll be seeing when I turn into my Cowden Drive. I'm 4 houses along on the riverside. I'm just making these points. Obviously, I'm a little surprised. I haven't been involved in any of the planning or thinking on it. Clearly, I've been very pleased to see the place developed. You know, it's nice to see the place improved. It was rather run down when I got there. The lady on the other side of the road to me was going to sell her house. When I built mine, she decided to stay there and completely remodel the whole building. Well, thank you for your time. And please take my thoughts into consideration with your deliberations.
Thank you.
My name is Chris Tribble, 716 County, which is right across from the development. Been here 40 years in this valley plus. Raised my kids right across the street from that lot. And no one has talked about safety at all. And that should be number one concern, not the landscape, not the lighting, but safety. My son almost got hit by a car there because there's no room, there's no sidewalk, there's no room, no anything. Especially when coming up from 8th Street and turning in, it comes up on a slope, it's a blind corner. So my house is right there on the corner. Along, there's a duplex, and you can't see. People walk their dogs and are scared to walk their dogs when they're approaching that corner because people turning left or right. Now, I know the driveway to this place is gonna be far enough, as far as they can back, which is right in front of Ralph Trapani's driveway. And that is not that far away. I've seen 4, 5, 6, 7 cars lined up trying to get out to 8th Street. Yeah, the alternative would be like, oh, let's go around the other side and get out. Well, you've been on that other side. You can't turn right and not be in the wrong lane. You can't get out of that side. You know, the neighborhood is dense. It's since I've lived there, it's a lot of people, a lot of traffic having to go through there. And I don't understand why and I do respect I love Habitat for Humanity, so it makes me really, I give there and I shop there and everything, but this is beyond what the density of that lot and is unsafe. And the design, I see the trash cans, I'll be looking at trash cans in a carport. Why can't that be on where the traffic is, where nobody cares, nobody lives? Things need to be taken into consideration. The road that goes up there on 8th Street is a slope, it gets icy in the wintertime. If any of you just stand on that corner of Cowden and 8th, any time of day, it never stops. And it's hard to drive in from Midland to turn left into my driveway. And my driveway is very short. And I can't, when I back out of that driveway, I can't go forward without going into the other lane, which is if somebody was turning right, we're going head on. So it's always been very, very dangerous, basically. You can't cross the street anywhere there. You can't cross at the light. You can't cross on Midland anywhere. It's very difficult just because there's a lot of traffic. And, you know, you have to walk all the way down to the corner of the bridge, the other side of the bridge to cross, because you can't cross right where Cowden is. It's just too much traffic. So I just, you know, the density of that lot is, I want you to consider that. I'd love for you to just stay on that corner for a little bit and visualize that building and visualize 16 to 18 more cars coming out of there all at one time, because they usually go to work at one time, only one way out. And at that time in the morning, that's when everybody's turning to go to Glenwood, or they're going straight. The traffic is pretty amazing. Now, kind of what disappoints me overall after being here for so long, that lot has never been taken care of by the city. It's been neglected. There's structures of leftovers of like Comcast type of data, giant steel.
Mr. Turtle, I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap it up quickly, please.
And I'm just saying, there's things that are right in front of us. It's never been taken care of at all. And I just would like you to consider, taking the time to really study that area. for safety.
Thank you.
I only have 3 minutes. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Hi, my name is Stephanie Davis and I live on Cowden also. I'm right across from the trash thing, which I didn't know was there until today, but at 710, and I'm only a renter, but I've been there for 5.5 years and I know all my neighbors. It is eclectic and there's some multiple apartment kind of things, but a lot of houses, a lot of families. The density has increased slightly. This is only anecdotal because I don't measure it, but like next to me, there's a 1-family dwelling and now 2 families live in it. It's about 1,000 square feet and ADU units. I've seen a couple of those pop up. So I don't know if you're counting dwellings or people. Regarding the trash, I mean, we already have code enforcement coming around because dumpsters and stuff, people feel like that's not their trash can, so they don't really stick it in all the way or close the door, but that's just because I'm afraid of bears. The trying to squeeze out of that space, I don't want to repeat too much of what the other person said, but that is really a narrow place to squeeze out of. People are lined up there. You can't go out Midland, you can't go out 8th. And right there on 8th, zooming to Midland or zooming in, it's supposed to be 25 miles an hour, but they really get their speed built up by the time they're getting up to Midland or trying to get to work or something. It chunks up a little bit out in front of here because there's stop signs, but I mean, people work up to a pretty good speed going by there. So that blind corner and the lack of safety is sort of increased because nobody goes 25. There's already, I think, 15 condos committed or more at 602 Cowden. So, I mean, I'd love to see if you guys could see how that goes first. There is no parking on Cowden. People, if they park and visit somebody, they're basically parking on their friend's property. Now, if you put the trees there and all that, I mean, there can't be any parking right there. Habitat, I also agree. I mean, it's nationally renowned. They're very well organized and well labeled. I mean, just seeing how they are here, it feels like going up against a corporate developer. I'm not against what they do or what you do, but to point to a blank spot on a map, it doesn't seem like. I know you've done some research, but doesn't constitute the support of the residents or the research. I saw you had a whole list of vacant lots, and I'd love you to start with a different one, you know, because this strollers and bikes do come down there. Families, my neighbors aren't here because we all come home from work anywhere between 5 and 7, throw on the dinner, go to the park, and you know, that's why there probably aren't more people here. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
My name is David Howard. Live in North Glenwood. And just by point of reference, I was on the steering committee for the comprehensive plan. And I think it was fine architecturally, technically presented project. It has one fatal flaw, maybe more than one. First of all, it's on public land. And to donate this for a development of this size in this location, it's a specious argument to represent that building out 8 units on this open space is the highest and best use for this property. It's a specious argument to say that this project corresponds to the comprehensive plan. Open space is valuable. In the context of the neighborhood and transportation, it's valuable open space. It's an entry to Glenwood Springs. It's on this connection to, it's actually, in context, it relates to Veltus Park. It's a major entry into downtown. It's a major transportation entry. It would be better served if there was maybe even just a transit station there than housing. Cowden itself is a very crowded neighborhood and has a great potential for redevelopment. This isn't it. Also, there's past agreements that I think the P and Z should be aware of, that I think our owner will speak to, where the city has made a commitment not to specifically call it open space, but to preserve and protect this space as open, because it is so close to our transportation neurology, if you would say, the way we move around, and to put these units crowded at this intersection is just a terrible idea. And to preserve and protect open space is as big as responsibility is to follow all this presentation and need for affordable housing. We have quality of life to think about in the next 20 years. This is not going to enhance quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Tribble. And so a couple of the things, I thought your design was beautiful. I really liked it. There's no issues there with that. I just think it's in the wrong place. I couldn't agree more with the gentleman that just spoke. I feel like that little tiny spot could be better used as a park and a place for the people in that tiny little subdivision, which is not really that tiny if you guys were to walk it and go back and see all the condos that are back in there and all the traffic that goes through. I mean, I know you guys are going to answer me back, but how many has even gone back in there and checked it out? How many of you really know what comes and what goes and who's in there? I don't know. I think that's a really great question. I'd love to hear the answer. The one of the flaws that I noticed was that it calls for 1.5 cars. Does anybody have 1.5 cars? Like, I know us, well, we can't use us as an example, but most people have 2 cars. So if you're going to have 14 spaces, you're really not leaving enough for the other spouse or the other roommate that's going to have a car. And then there's no space for a guest. So where would they go? They would have to go on Cowden. So that's just the parking. And then that driveway is dangerous and the intersection is very dangerous. Again, stand on the corner, sit there, watch what happens, and you would have to agree with us. Then it was mentioned about they don't have to work in town, but it's considered affordable housing or employee housing. I was a little confused with that one. So how does this affordable housing help the employee housing issue that you claim we have? I don't know, that didn't make sense. And then the HOA, the other thing about the HOA is, and we've all been on them, I've been on 2 or in 2 of them. And quite honestly, if you don't have somebody that's really going to stand up to these people and say, listen, Joe, you got to start throwing your trash away. Listen, Betty, you better start, parking your car a certain way. They're going to do whatever they want to do. And it'll get run down and it'll look like the housing projects that we don't want to have. So, like I said, it's a beautiful design. It has some really great features to it, but there's several flaws that need to be addressed. And I would really encourage you to vote no, do not do this. Let them work on it again, resubmit it. Let's get the people involved. It is public land. How do you as a government, as an incorporated state corporation, sell public land? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Don Gillespie. And summer sector coming out the holler tonight, so I'm just about lost my voice, so I might be able to holler. I think you guys have before you kind of the history of this property. I brought some copies of the filings that were done in court back in 2005 when the city bought this property and designated these used for future right-of-way use, whether it be a highway, bypass or whatever, and to hold it in trust for that. And anything public property that is used for public use if you're gonna sell it or change it, you have to have a public vote. Well, I don't know who advised you that it hasn't been used for public use, but it has. Whether it's for the utilities that were put under it, it was used when they redid 8th Street in Midland. And to me, I'm coming from the fact there should be a public vote on this. And it just should not be given. I have nothing against humanity, Habitat for Humanity, but I am against using this property, because what you're doing is you're creating a bigger problem by trying to solve a problem. And that's the way I look at it. And it just, to me, should have a public vote. And I was on the commission back in 2000, we did a transportation study with CDOT. And by the way, CDOT's not happy with this either, because they were part of the condemnation when we did this. By 2030, if there wasn't a bypass or a relocation of 82, Grand Avenue and 82 would be deadline. Well, I think, and that was at a certain increase in population. I think we well know that 20 years ago, we didn't dream of the population we have now already. And I think we'll be reaching that point way before 2030. And this is a very, very strategic intersection. And if, God forgive, we ever have a fire here, that's going to be an important escape route. And you have eliminated a lot of changes that can be made at this intersection by putting these units there. And CDOT has come forth to the city about they're not happy with the idea, because that's why they helped us condemn the property back in 2005. And one of the buildings you showed on the west side, I've been in the house that's right next to there. They have a great view of Silvers, but they're not going to have one after this. And they're the letter that I gave you from Tom and Debbie Martin, who opposed this also, but they're out of town. Do y'all have a copy? Okay, do you have a copy of the filing we did in 2005 when we condemned this property and bought it?
No.
I didn't give it to you. That is how hard to talk to you. Anyway, hopefully you'll get to see this filing that we did in 2005 when we condemned the property. And to hold in trust all these years. Jeff Haskell tried to sell it. And I got word about it. Got up with the council and they told Jeff, no, we're not going to sell it. And there's another little piece of paper in there when Larry Emery, who was the mayor in 2005, one of his biggest achievements, he thought, was us buying that piece of property and improving 8th Street in Midland in that particular section. Excuse me.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your comments, please. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, let's see, there is one attendee online. I don't know if that person is.
That's the post-independent.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I'll close the public comment period, seeing no further participants. And bring it back up here to the commission. We have and action item, planning item 2723. Habitat for Humanity Administrative Site and Architectural Plan Review. Staff is recommending approval, and I'm here to accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve planning file 2723. Finding conditions on. What page is it?
12,
12.
13,
13.
13. I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner White and a second by Commissioner Connerton. Do we have further comments somewhere?
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Yeah. I just was wondering if Richard could speak to the comments made by Hooner.
Sure, and we, taking a look at the pleadings that were offered, they were pretty poor quality of facsimile, and I've spoken with Carl about this at length, and he tried the condemnation that took the two parcels at 8th and Midland in 2005. And one thing up front is that, that determination of whether that condemnation allows this use and whether it goes to an election is not really within the Planning Commission's jurisdiction and should not be a consideration in the quasi judicial decision that occurs tonight or recommendation. But second, to kind of set the record straight, that condemnation, as the pleadings show, originally there was a survey for parcel A, which was the right of way for 8th Street and Midland intersection. And then parcel B was what's known as the fathering property. That, was the larger piece of property that was cut up to create the right of way. And the condemnation specifically requested possession of the right of way parcel and a temporary easement on parcel B. During the pendency of the immediate possession proceeding, which condemnations happen in two parts, possession and then an evaluation. During that pendency, the parties kind of came to a settlement and stipulated that the city would take possession to both parcels A and parcel B because the owner did not want parcel B anymore, the fathering parcel, basically because, and this is pretty common in condemnations, that the fathering parcel loses significant value. And so it's actually easier for the condemning party to just buy the whole thing. It did further go to a valuation trial, but that's not really relevant to what happened there. So, and then about regarding the charter provision requiring election or vote for the sale of city property, that is only required if property has gone to a public purpose. We have determined, in history, I think bears it out, that this parcel B, not the right of way parcel, but parcel B has not been put to a public purpose. And so a vote, an election is not required under the charter.
And just another comment, we did go through a very lengthy process to evaluate the comprehensive plan, and consistent feedback from the public was that we have a lot of investor-owned property that's being rented out, and that we are not providing diverse housing for Glenwood residents. And I think that this is a really huge, just a huge attempt to fill a diverse need in our community by providing for sale units at an affordable rate. And so I just really appreciate that effort. It grants people the path to home ownership and to building wealth in their lives. And I think ultimately is a beneficial thing for our community.
I mean, I can say that, you guys have done your due diligence. Thank you so much to the staff in particular. I mean, this could have, this really was an item that could have been for staff discretion, but instead brought it here and opened it up to public comment and, allowed us all to discuss it at great length. I really want to thank, Habitat for really truly being innovative and, really opening the door for people who wouldn't otherwise be able to live here. I can tell you that this is how I started my path living in this valley. I've also lived here for 40 years. As a single parent, it was very difficult for me to originally step into any sort of housing market. And, I was given that opportunity for affordable housing. Otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to raise my family here. And, you know, become a contributing member to the Glenwood community. And I'm really proud to be a member of this community and how much I appreciate living here. And it is really an innovative idea that you guys have brought to us, and I really appreciate it. And, you know, this infill project is really just with the strategic housing plan and all the work that we've, you know, that we've seen and put in, that, you know, this infill project is really needed in this community. So it's just a comment.
I have a question on CDOT. So does, I know CDOT's responsible for 82 and major roads. So what is CDOT responsible for Midland, but not 8th Street? Do we know, do you know that?
They don't have jurisdiction here. They were sent the application and didn't have any comments.
Right. Okay. One comment that I heard from multiple people, and I guess I would like to, I think your conditions are good, but would be, I would like to add some sort of traffic review with that, at that intersection. I go by that intersection a lot. And so at 8th and Cowden, and whether that's with, I don't know if that's with Public Works or streets or police, or I don't know who that is, but I would like to add that as a condition that the city reviews it with the applicant and comes up with you know, the applicant works through, here's what needs to be done. And I know that I'm familiar with that neighborhood. There is a lot of eclectic stuff in there and a lot of housing in there. But that would be something I would like to see.
Is that more, less of a condition and more of a, just we'd like to have that on public comment that they work with streets to make sure that that intersection is safe?
Well, I think it's a big deal. I mean, so I guess I would
Yeah.
almost like to see it as a condition. So that, but I mean, you know, it's a staff kind of thing, but I don't know who that is. I don't know, is that,
If it's a condition, do we?
is that
do it then?
engineering? Is that engineering that does?
It would be engineering that reviews traffic reports.
Well, I agree with you, Pete. I've gone through there on a bicycle, and it's one of those intersections that you take your life in your hands. You know, lighted signaling would help. Mr. Trapani mentioned in his letter that crossing, which doesn't relate to Cowden necessarily, but it does relate to pedestrians crossing 8th Street.
Even at the light.
Even at the light, well, you have the light,
But
but then
even
you
then,
have the
right.
lane coming
Even
off
at
of
the
8th
light, it's
going
not-
south.
Right.
North on Midland. It is hazardous there. So I would support that condition. And I would assume, I don't know what control Habitat would have, but I think asking them to work with the city to come up with a solution is a viable condition to include.
And so can I ask for clarification? Are we talking about about crossing 8th Street then versus crossing Cowden?
8th and Cowden,
Right.
pulling out of Cowden on the 8th Street.
Well, and also crossing 8th.
Yeah, I mean that, yeah, exactly. I'm talking about that same. We're saying the same thing, right? I mean, 8th comes into.
Well, I think it's a two, you know,
Cowden
where
comes
the
in.
pedestrian crossing is on 8th and Midland.
Right.
Is hazardous, but it is a line corner down there
Yeah.
where Cowden comes out. Things need to be done there to make both of those safer, in my view.
And it's kind of screwy because they're so close together. So that so
Yeah,
people are, I know I never would, but hustle going around if you're going west on 8th to make the turn. Anyway. I would like to add that. And then I guess on the HOA, and you talked about the HOA. But I think the parking. Yeah, and I think, so I don't think anything needs to be added because I think you have this in here already. Watkins is your condition number 10. And I don't know if that needs to be in the HOA, but that residents don't park in the Beltis Park overflow. That's how I view your number 10. Because there's 14 spaces for 8 units.
And the Beltis overflow lot has signage currently that says no overnight parking.
Yeah, but I'd like to see that in the HOA documents. And I don't think we need to make it, that doesn't need to be a condition, but I think that, you know, like there's all sorts of stuff in the HOA docs. And I mean, I think that hits the intent of what you have there. And one other question I have is that, so you didn't get any feedback from fire. And I saw engineering had a report, and I know there's one hydrant right there at the corner of 8th and Cowden, and engineering had just a question, should there be another hydrant in there is one question, and then the other question I would have is, I guess if there is a fire, they can access it right from 8th, because it's right there.
There's a lot of street frontage to choose from. Yes, fire is satisfied with the hydrant it has. The access drive not being more than 150 feet means that they don't need a fire truck turnaround either.
Okay. Thanks. So I guess the one thing I'm saying is to amend the motion to add the traffic review of Cowden and 8th. Is that hit what you're saying, George?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is maybe condition number 11.
I guess my confusion is they've already done a traffic study. So what are we specifically asking them to do other than that?
Well, what I read on the traffic study was that they did not look at that. They didn't, they looked at 8th and Pitkin. They looked at 8th in Colorado, but
Okay.
they did not look at that specific intersection. They looked at number of units being there and
Right.
and people coming out, but they didn't look specifically from a safety perspective, which I think is different.
And I agree with you. That was going to be one of my comments as well, that this is coming up consistently as a
Right.
hazard. But I guess I just am asking for specificity
Specific.
on what we want.
Well, that's
Done.
I guess that's what I'm saying. And I think I'm good with engineering going through. It's their responsibility to do that. So. But I think I mean, it's like a unanimous
Yeah.
here, and then secondarily from some of us that live around there.
So is that a motion?
Are you
to
comfortable
amend?
with that?
I am comfortable amending the motion to include that condition to our approval.
It's number 11, and I'll second that with that condition.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the amended, the added condition. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. And hopefully I pushed the right button.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And thank you for all your comments, and I encourage you to continue this. I know you didn't get what you were asking for today, but keep coming forth, and I know David is active, but the rest of you, I encourage you to be active in the community and converse with us and converse with council. Let your feelings be known. Thank you. And let's have a 5-minute recess. Our new item, which is a housekeeping thing. Code amendment to Title 070 regarding childcare uses, which is to be continued. So I will entertain a motion to continue that item to our next regular meeting in July. Who cares?
I'll make a motion.
I'll
Okay.
second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we'll just do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Okay, on to commissioner comments. Pete.
Talk to now.
Oh,
Thank you for the continued education. I appreciate this group here very much. Thank you.
Oh, I do have one. Thank you, Richard. That was very good. Thank you for, that was good.
I talked to him too.
okay. Go ahead.
I'm gonna talk some more. I did just find out, at a closing yesterday, that Garfield County has some sort of sales tax for mobile homes in the city of Glenwood Springs. That's a 3% tax that they would not close a mobile home transaction without that tax being paid. And I know, Commissioner Wusso's aware of this as well, but it is going to be hugely prohibitive for people to keep mobile homes as a affordable housing option if they're charged 3% tax every time a property transfers. So it's something, I don't know how it relates to Garfield County, but I was told by the closer, it is specific to the city of Glenwood Springs. Yes.
It's related to like when you buy a new vehicle or something like that. and you're-
I have no idea. I will get more information and pass it on to you, but it was something alarming to hear because it translates to like a $9,000
So it's a
tax or something like that.
transfer tax? Go ahead.
And that's.
I'm not sure if that's exactly how it's seen, but it's something new that just popped up. Yeah, which is
New,
very strange.
It's a sales tax because
it's gotta be
mobile
sales
homes are
tax.
considered personal property.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That'd be like when you.
But-
buy-
Anyway, I'll get more information about it. I know, that's why it's puzzling.
Property taxes.
Yeah,
We'll look into it.
okay.
Here's a call with the county attorney tomorrow
Oh,
or
God.
sometime.
Interesting.
Appreciate that, yes. And that's it. Oh, and one other question. Do we have any big applications coming up in the next 2 months?
I'll talk about that in director.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I
that's
have
right. Out of order, Joy, out of line.
no comment. April.
No comments.
Okay. Thank you all for your input. I was really curious about that and, and told some of the people that were here to talk about these issues from the public. We're volunteers up here interpreting the code more than anything. Talk to your commissioners. And hopefully they'll do that in the future. But in spite of all the efforts to outreach to the public,
We still-
until it comes at your doorstep, I guess people don't respond. So I wish the public could be more involved on a day-to-day basis, but they're not. So director's comments.
So we do have some stuff lined up. Obviously, the code amendment that was continued tonight for some code changes regarding childcare, and also other expanded code amendments that might be coming down your line in response to this strategic housing plan as well. We're trying to figure out timeline, but some of those you could start seeing those discussions in July and certainly in August. And then we also have some smaller applications, design variance applications that are up as well.
Yeah, I have another question, but did I read this right when I was reading through the information that, this was an item that you could have decided upon as director? But I think for political reasons, you brought it to us.
She's a chicken shoot.
I think you're being recorded.
Oh, is this on?
Yeah. But my question is, it sounded like there was one thing that it said the director had decided upon, kind of cherry picking out of the whole overview. Whereas, the general thing was to be put in our decision.
So we do have that authority in code for any administrative site and architectural plan review. So this is anything under 9 units. Staff is able to make decisions on. However, if we feel that it has some public contention to it, the director can certainly push it up to you guys for a public hearing. And in this sense, we felt that a public hearing was necessary to allow, for the record, public comment to be reviewed by you guys. So.
But my question is, it sounded, there might be numerous considerations within that review by us. I thought the implication was that one of those items, the director had decided upon that little bit of it. Did I misread that? And I don't remember what, I was reading through all this stuff.
I don't think there was a determination on this project that I made, but sometimes there are others that are, even though you will be reviewing it, I will make a decision on parking reduction, which is in director approval, or small other things in code that
So
will
it
come to you.
doesn't blanket refer to us. There are.
Yeah, it's very specific. My authority is very laid out and specific of what I can and can't do. But it won't change the level of review unless it's unless it's staff and I push it to you.
What if we were to disagree? As a, no, I don't.
I was gonna ask the same question. His question's a good question, is it? Because I thought Watkins said in his report that there were some things that you had said, you would have approved this kind of variance, like the trash enclosure going over, whatever they are. But then let's say that it comes to us and then we say, well, gosh darn it, we don't agree with that, or.
Yeah. We don't
could
feel
we
it's,
change?
we don't feel it's close enough to the public transportation to have a reduction in parking, for
Right.
instance.
Don't we have to stay
And
in our
that
lane?
We can free.
You guys are like free flying.
No, I think we can.
You guys are wild.
I'm looking at Richard because there is, in most other cases of authority, there's some pretty specific language, and I'm not exactly sure on those items that are director approved. If there's an appeal process at the next level.
There's like call up provisions in some sections of the code. I think it might vary based on application type and what the standards are, or what the decisions are being made. So, it's the sort of thing that we would, this is such a lawyer answer, we'd handle on a case by case basis.
Well, and it's probably a
If we
case by
recall
case
it.
question.
I want to find myself.
But just for clarity, in code, from decisions that are made at the staff level, we are meant to notify you so that you're aware of those changes being made at a minimum. And the same goes for when you guys make decisions. I let city council know of your decisions when you are the deciding authority. So there's kind of some checks and balances built in there.
It's probably hypothetical that,
Could happen.
yeah. So are we done here?
Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, we are adjourned.